So the next step here is persisting these OAuth tokens. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good if we get an OAuth token from a user, after doing the connect flow. And then whenever the user comes back, maybe 5 minutes later, maybe the next request, and they try to do something and we don't know what their token is anymore. Not a whole lot of good there. So what we want to do is find a way to persist this token in a way that we can access it later and use it for certain things. Now, one approach might be to maybe store it on a cookie on the user or something like that. And this sort of works, but the downside of that right now is that we can't access their APIs or do anything like that unless they make a request and we can get access to their cookies. So, maybe later we're going to do a Dropbox version that continuously syncs the folders, even when the user's not logged on. And we couldn't do that because we wouldn't have the token. So what we're going to do is look at a way to store the token in our database. That way that we can look it up for any individual user. We can say, all right, what's your Dropbox token? And then we can use it. So the way we want to go about doing this so there's a couple different things. First, we need to look at the tokens and just sort of see what they're encompassed of, what all pieces there are there. So that'll be this first video. After that, we're going to look at designing a model and building out all the model code so that we have a way to actually store these tokens in our database. Well, then after we've done that, we're going to come back to this code that we have here, and we're going to use that model and the services that we create, and we're going to store tokens in the database. And then finally, once we have all of that, we'll discuss different ways to handle deleting existing cookies or existing tokens, because the way we're going to do this, we don't want to store 3 different tokens for one user. We wouldn't know which one's the right one. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So, we're going to write our code so that if the user has a cookie or has a token, we're going to just overwrite it. We're going to delete the old one and create a new one. We could update it or something like that, but we're going to choose to create it. Delete the old one and just create a new one. And that's the way we're going to go about this. So I know this is a whole lot. I'm going to try to split this into 4 or so videos to make it a little bit easier. And we're just going to go ahead and just start right now by looking at this token type. So when we do this db-oauth.exchange, we get a token back. And we want to see what's in the token so that we know what we need to store in our database so that whenever we want to recreate the token, that's, it's available to us. The easiest way to do this is to go to the OAuth 2 docs and look at this token type. And from here, you'll see there's only 4 exported fields, and each one's documented pretty well here. We've got the access token, and that's the token that that's the token we use when we're calling APIs, and we want to do it on behalf of the user. This is the actual token string that we're going to, send to APIs and be like, this is my access token. So this is a string, and that's something we can easily store in our database. The next is the token type, and this is the just the type of token that we're going to be dealing with. And it says here, there's the default of bear, the default, but we can look at. I didn't mean to go this far in. Apparently, I went to the wrong place. Let me go ahead and get back here. So the token type isn't something we need to worry too much about, but it is a string, so it's easy just to store it in our database. And then we know we always get it right if we're recreating this token type. Next up is the refresh token, and the refresh token isn't something we're going to need. I don't know if I have it. Let me go ahead and see if our server is up and running. Nope. I want you to see the actual response we get back from a server so that you can see what all is in the raw token, and we can go from there. So here's everything. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go here, and in this, I'm going to split these all into different lines so you can see them all. And I actually want you to see the values of each, because you'll see here the refresh token is empty. And then finally we have this raw. This is a map, and there's a couple values here. Okay, so token type. You'll see here that we've got bear, like I had said. That's what we end up getting here. It's not capitalized like it says in the docs, but that's okay because this is something that apparently is returned by the Dropbox API. And if they expect it to be lowercase, then it should still work. And then refresh token. So refresh token is used whenever the access token expires. So the way OAuth typically works is you have this access token and it's good for maybe 2 days. The exact amount of time is defined by the API, but let's pretend it's good for 2 days. When that happens, this expiry here will have a date that's 2 days from the time you got your token. And whenever that token expires, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take the refresh token, and it's very similar to how we use the code. You're supposed to message the API and say, my token, basically it's a message that says my token expired, I need a new one, and here's my refresh token. So it'll check your refresh token, say, oh, you're allowed to get a new one, this refresh token's still valid. It'll send you a new access token, and you'll have a new expiration date for it. So, that's how it normally works. So with Dropbox, this access token never expires. That's why this expiry down here is this 111000 date. It never expires. So whenever that's the case, you get a date like this, and it means, we don't need to refresh this. So the upside to using a refresh token generally is that, if as a developer we were to lose this access token somehow to a security leak, it would only be good for however long this, this expiration date is. But aside from that, and realistically for thinking about it, if we do lose this token, not always, but there's a decent chance we might have lost the refresh token, so it doesn't add a ton of security. It adds some, but it's not a massive amount. And in this case, it looks like Dropbox decided that they didn't want to support it, so we won't have to worry about it. So you don't have to worry about these actual details yourself. The OAuth 2 library will handle refreshing your access token and things like that. You might have to handle restoring it in your database at some point. But even if you don't, anytime you try to make a connection with an invalid access token that's expired, the OAuth package will go ahead and refresh it for you, which is really nice. Okay, so we've got these 4 fields. We've explained what they do. We know we need to store these in the database. So I know that I said with Dropbox, we don't actually care about the expiration or the refresh token because, we don't use them. Well, we still want to store them in our database because we want to write code in a way that will work for any OAuth token. And the simplest way to do that is to take all 4 of these fields, store them in the database. They're the ones you need for OAuth tokens. And that way, if we do an OAuth integration with GitHub, Google, or any of those, we won't have to go rewrite all of this code. We can use the exact same database. We'll just have to make sure that when we do store this in the database, that we say what service it's for. So maybe we're going to have to say this is for GitHub or this is for Google. We're going to have to keep these 4 fields plus some data for ourselves, some metadata, so we know what this token is for. This raw information, there is more data in the token, but we don't need it all. Especially to recreate this token, we aren't going to need it. And you'll see in the future when we do take the data from the database and create a new token, that other stuff is just things that it's sort of data left over from when we exchange the code. It keeps it there so we can reference it if we need to. But when we're building from data we stored in our database, we won't need it. So we're not going to actually, let me go back here actually. I do want to go through the rest of these. I will say it's important to note that the refresh token is also a string. So our first 3 fields are all strings. And our last field is a time.time. All of these are data types that are supported by GORM for our database. So, for Postgres, like we're using, all of these are things we can just store directly in the database. We don't need to convert them to anything else. We don't need to, translate. Now, say this time was stored as something else, maybe it's some custom type. In some of those cases, you'll have to, maybe you'll convert it to JSON and store it in the database as a string, and then you'll export it from JSON, and then you'll turn it back into what it's supposed to be. But in this case, we won't have to do any of that. So we don't have to worry too much about that, which is, pretty handy. So I believe that's it for just going over what we're going to be persisting. In the next video, we're going to actually create this model. So we'll come over here to our models. We'll create a model to store these OAuth tokens. We'll go through the process of implementing everything and getting it all set up. And then once that's ready, we can come back to our main.go, and let me grab it real quick. We can come back to this, and inside of this callback, we can actually handle looking up who the current user is and storing a token for that user after they've connected their Dropbox account.